In the elite world of Navy SEALs, Marina exists as a ghost. For 3 years, she's swept floors while operators plan missions as if she isn't there. They've called her everything except her name. Tonight, 6 SEALs return from a failed operation, debating what went wrong with an intelligence asset codenamed Nightshade. Without looking up from her mop, Marina speaks 2 words that make the room freeze. The authentication code only one person would know. The mission wasn't a failure. She was the mission. And now, every man in that room knows it. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, please consider subscribing for more tales of unseen heroes. Naval Special Warfare Command's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Larissa Thorne pushed her cleaning cart down the polished corridor of the SEAL barracks. At 42, her body carried the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to move through spaces without being seen. Gray-streaked hair tucked beneath a faded navy cap, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast, the perfect disguise of insignificance. The sounds of returning operators echoed from the team room ahead. Larissa slowed her approach, timing her entrance for maximum invisibility. 3 years of cleaning these barracks had taught her the rhythms of when to be present and when to disappear. Commander Zachary Westfield's authoritative voice carried into the hallway. The intel suggests heightened activity near the target. We'll need to adjust our insertion point accordingly. Larissa entered, head down, and began emptying trash bins around the periphery of the room. 5 SEALs gathered around a table covered with maps and equipment, none acknowledging her presence. She was furniture to them, background noise with a mop. Lieutenant Tavish McAllister, sprawled in his chair, tossed an empty energy drink can that clattered onto the floor 3 feet from a trash bin. "Extraction's going to be tight if satellite intel is accurate," he said, making no move to pick up the can as Larissa silently retrieved it. "We've got a 2-hour window maximum," Westfield replied, spreading his hands across a map of what appeared to be a Southeast Asian coastline. "After that, we're compromised." Petty Officer Ronan Blackwood, the newest member of the team, shifted uncomfortably as he watched Larissa move to the corner. "Sir, are we discussing operation?" "Just preliminary planning," Westfield cut him off with a pointed look toward Larissa. McAllister snorted. "Relax, rookie. Mop lady here doesn't even speak English, do you?" He directed this last part at Larissa, who kept working without response. Larissa moved methodically around the room, wiping down surfaces, her weathered hands working with practiced precision. As she reached to clean beneath McAllister's propped-up boots, he deliberately shifted, causing her to stumble. Her elbow knocked against the table, sending coffee spilling across a stack of papers. "For crying out loud!" McAllister exploded, jumping up. "Are you serious right now? These are classified briefings?" Westfield frowned, quickly gathering the papers. "Be more careful around the important stuff," he said to Larissa, not unkindly but with the dismissive tone reserved for those deemed inconsequential. "Sorry, sir," Larissa murmured, her voice soft, accent carefully cultivated to sound vaguely Eastern European. She grabbed paper towels and blotted the spill, keeping her face turned down. "See what happens when they hire locals for sensitive areas?" McAllister continued. "Should stick to cleaning the mess hall, not places where actual military operations are planned." The others laughed or looked away uncomfortably. Only Blackwood remained silent, watching as Larissa efficiently cleaned up the spill. For just a moment, as she turned away, her posture shifted, back straightening instinctively before she caught herself and resumed her hunched position. In that brief instant, her eyes flashed with something that contradicted her submissive demeanor, something sharp, assessing, dangerous. But no one was looking closely enough to notice. "Speaking of operations," Westfield said, lowering his voice slightly as Larissa moved to the far side of the room. "Any word on Shadowfall?" At the mention of the operation name, Larissa's hand paused momentarily on the surface she was wiping, so slight, so controlled that it would have been imperceptible to anyone not specifically watching for it. "Officially scrapped after the Wraith situation," another SEAL responded. "That whole extraction was completely botched from the start." Larissa continued cleaning, face impassive, as the conversation shifted to weekend plans and upcoming training exercises. But something had changed in her eyes, a distant focus, a calculation beginning. She'd been waiting for something, And perhaps finally, it had arrived. The next day brought distinguished visitors to the barracks. Admiral Quentin Hargrove's presence sent a ripple of tension through the SEALs. His weathered face set in permanent lines of authority as he entered with Intelligence Officer Maeve Calloway at his side. Larissa kept to the shadows, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces as the team gathered for what was clearly an important briefing. She worked slower than usual, ensuring she'd remain in earshot. Operation Silver Spear has been compromised, Hargrove announced without preamble. Our asset extraction failed. The room tensed. Westfield straightened, his expression hardening. Sir, was it related to Shadowfall? Hargrove's eyes flickered briefly toward Larissa before dismissing her presence entirely. Yes. It appears the intelligence network established by Operative Wraith has been systematically dismantled. Our latest asset, codename Nightshade, was attempting extraction with critical intelligence on Chinese naval movements when communication was lost. Casualties? Westfield asked. Nightshade is presumed dead, Officer Calloway interjected, her voice clipped and professional. The extraction team made it out, but without the intelligence package. McAllister shook his head. That's the third asset we've lost this year. Something's not right. Blackwood, standing slightly apart from the others, noticed Larissa's methodical movements slowing further, her attention seemingly focused on her task, but her head tilted just enough to catch every word. The intelligence was solid, Westfield insisted. Nightshade's position was compromised before we could reach the extraction point. Or perhaps, Hargrove said grimly, we have a more fundamental problem with our intelligence apparatus since the Silverleaf incident. At the mention of Silverleaf, Larissa's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around her cleaning rag. A small scar on her wrist, normally hidden by her sleeve, became visible as her cuff rode up slightly. Calloway's sharp eyes caught the movement. She studied Larissa for a moment, longer than necessary, before turning back to the group. 5 years, Hargrove continued. 5 years since our best deep cover operative vanished during the Amaranthine extraction. The intelligence community has never fully recovered from that loss. The briefing continued with discussions of operational security and potential leaks. Throughout it all, Larissa moved like a ghost around the edges of the room, seemingly engrossed in her work, yet absorbing every word. When the meeting concluded and the Admiral departed, the SEALs remained, tension still thick in the air. McAllister, frustrated, kicked a chair out of his way as Larissa approached with her mop. This is what happens when we rely on civilians for military operations, he spat. Wraith, Nightshade, Silverleaf, all liabilities. Silverleaf wasn't a civilian, Blackwood said quietly. I read the redacted file during intelligence training, highest decorated operative in naval intelligence history. And where is Silverleaf now? McAllister challenged. Dead in some jungle without even a body to bury. A failed operative is a failed operative. Larissa continued mopping, her movements precise and controlled. But something had changed in her demeanor, an almost imperceptible straightening of her spine, a dangerous stillness beneath her practiced invisibility. Later that evening, as Larissa collected trash from beneath desks, McAllister deliberately knocked over his waste bin, scattering contents across the floor. Oops, he said with a cruel smile. Guess you've got more work to do, mop lady. Maybe if you'd had a real career, you wouldn't be cleaning up after real soldiers. Larissa knelt silently, gathering the scattered trash, but as she rose, for just a moment, her gaze locked with Blackwood's across the room. In that unguarded instant, Blackwood saw something that made him freeze, a flash of such cold calculation, such absolute certainty, that it felt like looking into the eyes of a completely different person. Then it was gone, hidden again behind the meek facade of a woman no one bothered to truly see. Night fell over the base. Most personnel had retired to their quarters or left for weekend liberty. Only Westfield's core team remained in the barracks, nursing beers and dissecting the failed operation. The intelligence was good, Westfield insisted, pacing the room. We were too late. Nightshade was already gone. Or the intelligence was compromised from the start, McAllister countered, opening another beer. We've been chasing ghosts since Silverleaf disappeared with the Amaranthine files. Silverleaf didn't disappear with them, Blackwood corrected. According to the file, Silverleaf died getting those files out. Larissa moved quietly around the room's perimeter, wiping down surfaces that were already clean. The SEALs had grown so accustomed to her presence that they continued their classified discussion without concern. "That's the official story," Westfield said, lowering his voice slightly. "Truth is, no one knows what happened to Operative Silverleaf or the complete Amaranthine Protocol. Half the intelligence community thinks Silverleaf went rogue with the files." McAllister snorted. "That's what happens when you put a woman in deep cover. Emotional decisions, compromised objectives." "Silverleaf had the highest success rate in the program's history," Blackwood argued. 3 years of deep cover operations without a single compromise. "Until the end," Westfield said grimly, "when it mattered most." McAllister deliberately knocked an empty bottle toward Larissa. "We should have sent a SEAL team instead of relying on Operative Silverleaf. We'll never know what happened to those files now." Larissa bent to pick up the bottle, her movements unhurried. Then, without looking up from her task, she spoke in a voice entirely different from her usual submissive murmur, clear, commanding, and distinctly American. "Amaranthine Protocol, authorization Silverblade 7 Delta 9er. The room went deadly silent. Westfield's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. McAllister froze mid-motion, color draining from his face. Blackwood slowly rose to his feet, instinctively standing at attention. Larissa straightened to her full height, shoulders back, all pretense of subservience vanishing as she fixed Westfield with a penetrating stare, her entire demeanor transformed from invisible to commanding in an instant. Westfield could barely form words. "That's impossible. Silverleaf died extracting the Amaranthine files." "I completed the mission," Larissa stated, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "Every objective. While your team was conducting the diversionary extraction, I was uploading the complete files to secure servers. Your team left before confirmation, as ordered." "But the records say," Blackwood began. "The records say what they needed to say," Larissa cut him off. "Sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight. The Amaranthine Protocol required my death, officially." McAllister had backed against the wall, recognition and shock battling on his face. You're Lieutenant Commander Thorne, the Silverleaf?" "For 5 years, I've been monitoring potential security leaks from inside this facility," Larissa continued, ignoring him. "Evaluating personnel, tracing information flows, identifying vulnerabilities. And now, it seems, my mission is reaching its conclusion." She reached into her pocket and removed a small device, placing it on the table. "This contains evidence of systematic intelligence compromise originating from this command. Admiral Hargrove will receive it at 0600 tomorrow. I suggest you all prepare for debriefing." Westfield found his voice at last. "Why reveal yourself now? After all this time?" Larissa's expression remained impassive, but her eyes carried the weight of years of silence and invisibility. "Because Nightshade wasn't compromised," she said quietly. "Nightshade succeeded. The intelligence is already secure, and the mission that began 5 years ago with Amaranthine is finally complete." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Lieutenant McAllister, a real soldier knows that respect is earned by character, not rank. Remember that during your court-martial." The following morning, Larissa, now dressed in her proper uniform with Lieutenant Commander insignia, stood in Admiral Hargrove's office as Westfield's team entered. The shock on their faces deepened at seeing her transformation from invisible janitor to decorated naval officer. "Gentlemen," Admiral Hargrove began gravely, "allow me to reintroduce Lieutenant Commander Larissa Thorne, the most decorated intelligence operative in naval history, and the architect of our most successful deep cover operation to date." McAllister's face flushed with shame as he remembered every dismissive comment, every deliberate slight. Blackwood stood tall, a new respect evident in his posture, and Westfield, professional to the core, extended his hand to Larissa, acknowledging both his error and her extraordinary service. "Commander Thorne," Westfield said formally, "on behalf of SEAL Team 8, I extend our profound respect and apologies." Larissa accepted his handshake with a firm grip. "Commander Westfield, your team performed as expected. Every mission has compartmentalized information. You weren't meant to know." Admiral Hargrove gestured for everyone to be seated. For the record, the operation Commander Thorne has been conducting was authorized at the highest levels. After the Amaranthine incident, we had evidence suggesting a potential intelligence compromise within Naval Special Warfare Command. Rather than conducting an obvious investigation that would alert any potential actors, we implemented Operation Ghostwalker. My death provided the perfect cover, Larissa explained, her voice now carrying the full authority of her rank. As Silverleaf, I was too recognizable within intelligence circles. As a base janitor with a carefully constructed background, I became invisible, even to elite operators trained to notice threats. The perfect disguise, Blackwood said, understanding dawning on his face. Hide in plain sight where no one would think to look. Precisely, Admiral Hargrove nodded. Commander Thorne has spent the last 5 years mapping information flows, identifying security vulnerabilities, and tracking classified intelligence leaks. What she discovered was more troubling than we anticipated. Larissa activated a small projection device, displaying a network diagram on the wall. We identified systematic information compromises linked to Chinese intelligence operations. These weren't random breaches, but a coordinated effort to access specific operational details. McAllister, still visibly uncomfortable, shifted in his seat. And Nightshade was working directly under my supervision, Larissa replied. While you were attempting the visible extraction as planned, Nightshade was delivering the actual intelligence package through a secondary channel. The mission wasn't a failure, Lieutenant. It was a success with a carefully managed cover story. Admiral Hargrove stood, his expression grave. Lieutenant McAllister, you are hereby relieved of duty pending investigation into your involvement with unauthorized information disclosures. Military police are waiting outside to escort you to detention. The color drained from McAllister's face. Sir, I would never. Your financial records indicate otherwise, Larissa said calmly. 3 offshore accounts with deposits corresponding precisely to intelligence breaches. Quite careless for someone so vocal about operational security. 2 MPs entered, flanking McAllister, as he was led from the room in stunned silence. When the door closed, Admiral Hargrove turned to Westfield and Blackwood. Your team has been cleared of any involvement. In fact, Petty Officer Blackwood's observational skills have been noted in Commander Thorne's reports. Blackwood looked surprised. Sir? Larissa's expression softened slightly. You noticed discrepancies others missed. You questioned inconsistencies. These are the qualities of a good intelligence officer. Gentlemen, the Admiral continued, you are dismissed. The details of this operation remain classified at the highest level. As they stood to leave, Westfield paused. Commander Thorne, if I may ask, how did you maintain your cover for so long? The physical demands alone of living 2 separate lives? For the first time, a hint of a smile touched Larissa's lips. I've spent my career becoming other people, Commander. The challenge wasn't becoming a janitor. The challenge was remembering not to correct your tactical assessments when they were flawed. After they departed, Admiral Hargrove sat heavily in his chair. 3 years of invisibility, Larissa. Most operatives would have broken. Invisibility has its advantages, she replied, straightening papers on his desk with the same precision she'd once applied to cleaning. People reveal their true nature when they think no one of consequence is watching. And now, the Ghostwalker protocol is complete. Larissa looked out the window at the naval base, watching personnel go about their duties. Now, we implement the intelligence Nightshade delivered. China's new submarine capabilities won't remain secret for long. I've authorized your reinstatement to active duty, Hargrove said, sliding a folder across the desk. Your choice of assignments. Larissa opened the folder, scanning its contents. Counterintelligence, South Pacific Command. Appropriate, given what we've learned. The Navy needs Silverleaf back, Commander. The real Silverleaf, not the ghost we created. 1 week later, Larissa walked the same corridor in her intelligence officer uniform. Personnel who had once looked through her now stood straighter, offering respectful nods as she passed. Near the barracks entrance, she encountered Blackwood. Commander, he acknowledged respectfully. I wanted to say, I'm learning to look beyond appearances. Larissa nodded. The most valuable lessons often come from our mistakes, Petty Officer. If I may ask, what was the hardest part? Being invisible for so long? Larissa considered the question. Not the invisibility itself. That was the mission. The hardest part was watching good people make judgments based on incomplete information and knowing I couldn't correct them. Is that why you revealed yourself when you did? You could have let McAllister continue thinking he was superior, even as he was led away. Every mission has its moment of revelation, petty officer, she replied. Sometimes justice requires witnesses. As she continued down the hallway, she noticed a new janitor struggling with a supply cart, ignored by passing personnel. Larissa stopped, helped stabilize the cart, and made eye contact with the startled worker. "Thank you, ma'am," they said, surprised by the acknowledgement. "Everyone deserves to be seen," Larissa replied simply, before continuing on her way, visible at last, but never forgetting what it meant to be invisible. The debriefings continued for weeks. Each day, Larissa sat across from different intelligence officials, meticulously recounting her 5 years of deep cover. The recordings would become training material for future operatives, though most of the details would remain classified for decades. "Your psychological evaluations show remarkable stability, Commander Thorne," noted the lead psychiatrist during their final session. "Most operatives experience significant identity dissolution after prolonged deep cover assignments." Larissa regarded him steadily. "My identity was never in question, Doctor. The mission required a role, not a new identity." Still, 3 years of being treated as invisible, enduring consistent disrespect, would affect most people. "It provided valuable intelligence," she replied simply. "The way people behave when they think no one consequential is watching reveals their true character." Later that afternoon, Admiral Hargrove summoned her to his office. The formal reinstatement ceremony was scheduled for the following day, but this meeting was private, away from the cameras and commendations that would soon follow. "The Secretary of the Navy will be presenting your medals personally," Hargrove said, closing a folder on his desk. "The President sends his regards as well." Larissa nodded, standing at perfect attention. "The recognition is appreciated, sir, but unnecessary." 5 distinguished intelligence crosses is hardly unnecessary, Commander, not to mention the Presidential Medal of Freedom. "The medals aren't why I serve, Admiral." Hargrove studied her for a moment. "I know that, Larissa. It's why I selected you for Ghostwalker. Anyone else would have broken cover within months. Most intelligence officers need recognition, validation. You only needed the mission." He stood, moving to the window overlooking the harbor. "The intelligence you gathered has already prevented 3 major security breaches. McAllister's network has been completely dismantled. Beijing's submarine intelligence operation is compromised. And the Amaranthine Protocol? Secure, as it has been since you extracted it 5 years ago." Hargrove turned back to face her. "Which raises the question, Commander. Why maintain your cover for so long? You could have revealed yourself after confirming McAllister's involvement a year ago." Larissa's expression remained professional, but her eyes revealed a deeper calculation. "The operation wasn't just about McAllister, sir. It was about the entire network. Revealing myself too soon would have alerted his handlers before we identified all their assets." "And the personal cost? 3 years of invisibility, of disrespect, was minimal compared to the intelligence value gained." Her voice remained steady, but for just a moment, a flash of something crossed her face. Something Hargrove recognized from decades in intelligence work, the subtle tell of a partial truth. "Tomorrow's ceremony will be followed by a press conference," Hargrove continued, letting the moment pass. "Obviously, operational details remain classified, but the public narrative will acknowledge your heroism and sacrifice. Sir, if possible, I'd prefer to minimize the public exposure." Hargrove smiled slightly. "Still more comfortable in the shadows, Commander? Even after all this time?" "Old habits, Admiral." For the first time, a hint of warmth touched her expression. "Besides, my next assignment may require a certain level of anonymity. South Pacific Command has already requested you specifically. Counterintelligence Division needs rebuilding after the recent compromises. You'll have complete operational authority." "When do I start?" 2 weeks. The Navy has insisted you take leave first." Hargrove's tone softened slightly. "You've earned it, Larissa. 5 years of constant vigilance takes a toll, whether you acknowledge it or not. The next morning, Larissa stood before a formation of naval personnel. Her dress uniform gleamed in the morning sun, medals and ribbons telling a story of service few would ever fully understand. Beside her, Westfield and his team stood at attention, Blackwood's face showing unmistakable admiration. As the Secretary of the Navy pinned the Distinguished Intelligence Cross to her uniform, adding it to the impressive row already there, cameras flashed. For someone who had spent years avoiding notice, the spotlight felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. Lieutenant Commander Thorne's extraordinary sacrifice and service represent the highest traditions of naval intelligence, the Secretary announced to the assembled crowd and media. Her actions have safeguarded countless lives and protected our nation's most vital secrets. Afterwards, during the reception, Larissa found herself approached by junior officers and enlisted personnel, many offering congratulations, others simply wanting to be near the woman who had become an instant legend within the intelligence community. Blackwood made his way to her side, offering a glass of water. "How does it feel, Commander? To be visible again?" Larissa accepted the glass with a nod of thanks. "Different, though I suspect the novelty will fade quickly." "The story they're telling about your heroism," he hesitated. "It barely scratches the surface of what you actually did, does it?" "Most important things happen in the shadows, petty officer." She took a sip of water. "The public story serves its purpose." "I've been approved for intelligence training," Blackwood said after a moment. "Your recommendation, I'm told." "You have the right instincts. You notice what others miss." Larissa studied him appraisingly. "That can't be taught." Before he could respond, Westfield joined them, extending his hand to Larissa. "Commander Thorne, my team ships out tomorrow. I wanted to convey our respect before departing." She shook his hand firmly. "Your team performed admirably, Commander Westfield. The operational security breaches were never at your level." "Still," Westfield's expression was solemn, "knowing you were there, watching us all that time, hearing how some of my men spoke to you," he glanced briefly at Blackwood, "it's a hard lesson in humility." "The best lessons usually are," Larissa replied. "Your team follows your example, Commander. Remember that on your next deployment." As the reception continued around them, Admiral Hargrove approached with a civilian Larissa didn't recognize, a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. "Commander Thorne, allow me to introduce Director Callahan, Central Intelligence Agency." Larissa shook the offered hand, her expression revealing nothing. "Commander," Callahan's voice was smooth, practiced. "Your work has made quite an impression at Langley. We've been following your career with great interest." "Director," she acknowledged neutrally. "Perhaps we could discuss your future plans? The agency has need of officers with your particular skill set." "I appreciate the interest, Director, but I've already accepted my next naval assignment." Callahan smiled. "Of course, but perhaps we could talk anyway. Sometimes the most interesting opportunities aren't the obvious ones." After he moved away, Hargrove leaned closer. "He's been pushing for your transfer since we revealed Ghostwalker's success." "I'm not interested in changing uniforms, Admiral." "I told him as much," Hargrove said with a slight smile, though his persistence suggests the matter isn't closed. 2 days later, Larissa stood alone on the beach near the base, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. 5 years of maintaining perfect vigilance had created habits that wouldn't easily fade, constant awareness of sightlines, exits, potential threats. Even now, in solitude, part of her mind cataloged the distant figures walking along the shore, assessing and dismissing them as non-threats. Her phone vibrated with a message from Hargrove. "Package secured. Confirmation of complete network neutralization. Mission officially concluded." A weight lifted from her shoulders, one she'd carried so long it had become part of her. The Amaranthine Protocol was truly over. McAllister's network dismantled, the intelligence secure. As darkness fell over the water, Larissa allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. 3 years of invisibility had taught her more about human nature than a lifetime of conventional service. She had seen people at their worst and, occasionally, at their best. She had learned the power of being unseen, unnoticed, underestimated. Walking back toward the base, she passed a young female enlistee struggling with a heavy equipment case. Without hesitation, Larissa stopped to help. "Thank you, Commander," the young woman said, recognizing the rank insignia. Then, her eyes widened. "Wait, you're Commander Thorne, aren't you? The one from the ceremony yesterday?" "Just doing my job, Ensign," Larissa replied. "Same as you." As they walked together toward the base, the ensign asked, "Is it true what they're saying? That you spent years undercover as a janitor, watching for spies?" "Parts of the story have been exaggerated," Larissa said diplomatically. "Still, it must have been difficult, being invisible for so long." Larissa considered this. Sometimes being invisible gives you a certain kind of power. You see things others miss. You hear truths people only speak when they think no one important is listening. "I'll remember that," the ensign said thoughtfully. "Do," Larissa advised. "In our line of work, what people don't notice is often more important than what they do.